think it's a game? You think it's game? Y'all gon' make me lose my mind. Hey, yo, what's my name? Y'all gon' make me go all out. DMX. Y'all gon' make me act a fool. Hey, yo, what's my name? Y'all gon' make me lose my cool.
I tried so hard.
What y'all really want? What y'all really want?
But it doesn't even matter. Come on. I tried so hard.
What y'all really want?
It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. Come on.
Boy, give me a sign. Dog, I meet bitches, the street bitches, slash, Cocoa Puff, sweet bitches, make you wanna eat bitches, but not me.
I tried so
I fuck with these hoes from a distance. The instant they start to catch feelings, I start to... What is it you want from it? I gave you, you gave me. I played you, you played me.
and got so far. But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to lose it all. But in the end,
Welcome everyone to another edition of the Showcase Pod. I am Don Vega, like always, joined by the boss, Chris Blackheart. This is a special Christmas edition.
I
of the
love
Showcase
it because
Pod.
you've been booking some great guests, and I sit back, I learn, I laugh,
You learn, laugh.
I learn and laugh because, and I found out that you actually have more friends than I ever thought of.
other than yourself.
Yes, well, yeah, well, if you can count your friends on your fingers, you're doing good.
Well,
Unless you're a one finger guy.
unless you're four fingers for some people. But nonetheless, we do have a very special
We
guest.
do.
We go way back. He's a friend of mine's. We go back from like the mid 2000s. You know, some people call him HS. Other people call him Darling. Damien Darling, welcome to the Showcase Pod.
Don Vega, thanks for having me.
Yep, it's been a long time. We're gonna catch
Blackheart,
up.
you too.
It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to stories, fixing rumors, and just catching up where you go. I mean, before we got on, you were literally shooting the shit, and you guys said it was almost a decade that you guys actually saw each other. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes.
Well, speaking of that, how come I can't see you guys now?
Well. Oh, okay. So I guess on the live you can see all three of us, but whoever's watching the live could see us there, Damien. But I guess we can't see each other. But nonetheless, I like to start off with every guest that we have on. How did Damien Darling get hooked in professional wrestling?
Well, hold on. Maybe you can get Dan DeJabron to fix this for the next guest. I mean, I feel like I'm talking to myself because I'm looking through my phone and I'm looking at myself talking to myself. So maybe in 2024 you could get Dan DeJabron to up the ante a little bit here.
Yes, indeed. He's listening. He's working on it.
For me, when did I start getting into wrestling? I mean, like a lot of people, it was like, how do you say it? It was like heroin. The first time I tried it, I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Bring me back to like 92. It was the angle with Ric Flair, Razor Ramon, Mr. Perfect, Ric Flair, Survivor Series.
Mm-hmm.
When Perfect pours the water over Bobby Heenan's head. Primetime wrestling.
Yep.
And I've just been flipping through the channels as a kid, and I fell in love with it, and Razor Ramon was my favorite wrestler, and then from there it was watching it on Saturdays and Sundays like we all did in the early 90s as wrestling fans, and the Hasbro figures and the wrestling magazines, and then Monday Night Raw and the Monday Nitro, the Monday Night Wars. So it was just it was an addiction, man.
Mm-hmm. So how do you first get started? I know we actually met up in New York.
Yeah.
You were working for Bobby Rydell.
Well,
Well,
you got to watch how you say that, Poppy.
well, But that's how I met you. I remember seeing you up in New York. Going up there and doing some shows for Bobby and Carmine at the
So,
church.
so let's take a step back, right?
Yep.
So I was a wrestling fan as a kid, lifelong wrestling fan. I didn't go right into wrestling. I was actually in a band. So
Okay.
I was the singer of Darlings and Disciples.
Mhm.
I was a huge Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose fan. So when the band kicked me out, I was like, what am I going to do now on the weekends to pick up girls? So I decided that I was going to go into wrestling training and go back to what my original my original passion was, and that was for pro wrestling.
Mhm.
So I took the Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose, Darlings and Disciples, Damien Darling. So that's how that happened.
Okay.
And then started training. And now here's the story in itself, right? Because you brought up Bobby Rydell.
Mhm.
So there was that wrestling promotion in Long Island. I guess you can't really call it a wrestling promotion because it was a wrestling ministry,
Mhm.
right, Richie?
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where they held wrestling shows in like this enormous in this enormous Christian facility.
Yes.
I mean, the facility was like the size of Nassau Coliseum.
Mhm.
It was huge.
Yes.
They ran good shows, and it was sort of like I don't know if anybody listening watches like the Righteous Gemstones on HBO, but it was very much like one of those Christian ministries.
Mhm.
And that's how we met, because the ministry had a portion of it that was wrestling related, and Don Vega, Damian Darling, Bobby Rydell, Blast, Chris Sokol, Zach Carter. We
Yes.
were all in the same pool.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. And those were some fun times. I remember like shows like the Balloon Fest there that we did that had like three or four different stages of music and thousands of people. That was a crazy event that we got to work down there for those guys. And
And those were the days, Don. Those were the days before live streaming, before Facebook, before Instagram, before TikTok, maybe even like early stages of YouTube. So if
yes.
you remember, that balloon festival was like all being streamed over the internet.
Mhm.
Like those were all like, I mean, what year was that? It was like 2008, 2010.
Yeah. Yeah. Around there.
Those were all those early stages of social media that we were a part of it, and you're right, like there were thousands of people at that balloon festival. And and it was one of those things where it was like we spent 3 days together under a tent. Remember there was like a hurricane,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we're all under the tent, and at some point like there's lightning, and we're all under this metal tent, like holding the tarps over our head so it doesn't blow our locker room away. And like we might have looked at each other and been like, is this even safe for us? Like we could probably
Mhm.
shot here.
Yeah, the stuff like that doesn't, really happen anymore. Those were some good times, some good days. And then right after that, shortly after that, we met again out in Massachusetts
Yep,
for individual that a lot of people, are familiar with in pro wrestling, Mr. Mike Spotter.
the legend. uh,
Yes. So,
John, that's one of the things in wrestling. Like there's a school by me, Warriors of Wrestling, that I go to once in a while and stop in and talk to some of the guys. And a lot of the question I hear often is like, how do I get booked and stuff like that.
mhm,
And I don't know too much about what's going on these days because I'm sort of away from. It's fair to say I'm away from it now,
mhm,
but back then it was such a fun time because you met people that you gravitated to, and and that helped you out.
yeah,
You know, when I think of who I was in wrestling and where I was, where I started, and then how much I grew in a short amount of time,
mhm,
specifically up in Massachusetts, working for Mike Sparta.
yeah,
I mean, you remember my first show for Mike Sparta, I was wearing white kick pads and, you know, and straight black tights. I was
Yes.
as jabroni as you could get.
Yeah.
But then, you know, it didn't take very long for me to find that HS character that we talked about.
Hmm.
You know,
So let's talk about that. Were you a Michael Hayes fan? You know, growing up in the business, watching the wrestling business and stuff like that. Is that some of the influences that you had around that time?
not so much as a kid, because as a kid, like I said, I got into it around 92.
Hmm.
But when I got into it, I got super into it. So I was watching WWF and WCW.
Yeah.
And at that time, Michael Hayes was like, you know, mid Carter and WCW, sort of doing a very like stale Freebirds thing.
Yep.
But I did do my research and I did learn, you know, about Bad Street USA and the Freebirds and, you know, what that shtick was. And with me, with my singing background and my musical background, I was like, oh man, like I could totally like do something similar of, you know, the rock star wrestler. And then when you take it a step further, as you know,
Hmm.
there was a side of me that was the party, whiskey drinking, uh, after hours, going with girls. So I had that kind of Michael Hayes Freebird blood in me.
Yeah.
So it just sort of fit.
Okay. Chris, you're sitting here.
No, you know, again,
Listening.
Oh,
this,
Chris, I dare you to say something, bro.
no, you know, no, you know what it is? Ironically, it's kind of like when Savia was on. I didn't know your beginning, you know, and so just being educated by the history before, it just enlightens. And we always tell the kids you have to learn the history, and to have a guest like you that, you know, I know what you did with Spotter, and I know you done with Vega, but I didn't know your beginning. So just the fact,
And you know, Chris, a lot of guys didn't, which to me felt really cool because you know we were the generation or generation two after the territory days.
Mhm.
So for me, I was a New York guy. I was a New York, New Jersey guy. And when I met Don Vega and Zach, then it opened up the doors to Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. So for me, driving up 95 North 3 hours, I experienced a completely different locker room, a completely different crowd, and you're damn near in a different territory. It's a completely different style, especially in those years. So my point was like, you know, when I came up to Massachusetts and I met a lot of the guys up there, you know, they didn't know my start. They didn't know where I came from because I just sort of popped up one day.
what was the difference between you working in, because you know we talk about it now that New York training and style is different than a lot what we're doing in Massachusetts, New England. What's the difference back then between the New York style and like the New England style?
I mean, like I'm not like a wrestling like historian like some people, you know what I mean? Like I'm not a Jim Cornette that could give you the exact details, but I could tell you one thing. I could tell you like the final Freebird character that I did got over in Massachusetts, it would have never gotten over in New York. The New York crowd is a little is the New York crowd is New York. The Massachusetts crowd was more old school wrestling.
Yeah, so New York always had that fast paced, spotty, you know, kind of like what Ring of Honor was in the beginning. And, you know, they loved that style. Massachusetts, you can still work TV style, you know, old school 80s WWF style wrestling.
You're absolutely right. In when I started in New York, New Jersey, you had guys like Jay Lethal, you had all the Ring of Honor guys, you had all the Jersey old pro wrestling guys, you had SAT, you had Xavier, you had Homicide, you had all those guys that were on every single New Jersey, New York show.
Yeah.
Wasn't exactly character driven.
Yeah, it was more
Over
the moves and the spots.
shoot over to Massachusetts. Hey, listen, it's not, you know, not to say a moonsault or a nice high spot wouldn't get you over, but you go over to Massachusetts, and if you had a gimmick like the Devil's Reject Brandon Webb, or the Final Freebird Damian Darling, or the Punisher Don Vega, the crowd took that and absorbed it and reacted to it.
Hmm. So talk to us about, like you said, you came in, you started working for Mike, and right away you understood what you needed to do, and you kicked it into gear. Talk a little about the relationship with you and Mike, and the opportunities that you got working for the WWA or
Yeah.
uh, Spotter.
I mean, Richie, Don, I think it's fair to say that, like, when I started working, well, for those who don't know, Mike Sparta is a legendary New England wrestling promoter.
Hmm.
I mean, as the story goes, his brother was a WWF referee
Hmm.
who was Pat Patterson's boyfriend. That Don, am I telling a lie?
Nah, you're right on the money for that.
Okay, so you tell me when I'm telling lies, okay?
Keep it
So
going.
so Freddie Sparta was Mike Sparta's brother. He was the boyfriend of Pat Patterson. So when you worked for Mike Sparta, like, he let you know, I got connects. I got connections like nobody's got connections. That's my Mike Sparta impersonation.
Yeah, yeah.
For those that were waiting for. And he'd tell you he's got connections. But if you work for those other promoters, fuck yourself.
Yeah.
So here I was, just getting into the business, just breaking into the New England area, and I've got this promoter telling me, like, "Oh, you're a singer? Who's a singer is Pat Patterson. You're cute too. He'd like you." So, I mean, but kidding aside, when I talk about Mike, I owe him a lot of thanks because he gave me an opportunity.
Yeah.
He gave a lot of people opportunities. There were a lot of guys that had those one weekend shots with Mike. It didn't work out, and you never seen him again.
Hmm.
I came in, I worked for Mike. I was wearing my first weekend with Mike. I was wearing white kick pads, black tights, and a black tank top because my gear wasn't ready yet. So I came in like a jobber, and I was a jobber. I was green.
Yeah.
But then Mike gave me the opportunity to wrestle on each show, and I grew and I learned, and I worked with guys like Danny Davis and Spike Dudley, and I was in the locker room with Don Vega and the Joseph Von Schmitz and Zach. And Zach was a huge help. Me and Zach were buddies. We traveled a lot, and you make a lot of people, I think, have the misconception that a referee isn't as experienced or smart to the business,
Hmm.
and that's very wrong. Because if it wasn't for Zach, I don't think I would have gotten as smartened up as fast as I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't take long, Rich. Don Vega, Richie or Don. What do you want me to call you here?
Whatever, man. We go back. You could call me Rich. Everybody knows that's my government name. Whatever comes out.
And it didn't take long before I was working the names on the shows. I was in the main events. I was in a good position. I was getting nice paydays. And I had worked my way up the ladder.
Hmm.
So I owe a lot to Mike. He was always very good to me. There's a lot of stories about Mike. Most of them are true. Some of them aren't. Whatever. He was what wrestling, I think, lacks these days. I think now wrestling, like, if you hear like a backstage horror story, it's like maybe they try to sweep it under the rug. But
Yeah.
to me, that was always the fun part of wrestling. It was like, oh my God, you work for this promoter that tried to stab Rikishi with a sword. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that was listen, we are these fucking maniacs on the road that are trying to make it here. Shit gets intense. Shit gets real.
Has
Yeah.
that footage ever surfaced?
Yes.
Yeah,
All
there's
right.
footage of that on the internet
Yeah.
somewhere.
All right.
Absolutely.
We'll get into that. that a little bit there. So I don't remember the exact location of that show, but I do remember that Bucci was there for one of the camps, looking at talent, and it was like an outside inside thing that you could close in.
I thought
One of
that
those
I want to say it
venues.
was
And,
Bridgewater,
and Don, to take a
Bridgewater
step
Whitman.
further, just like I was saying about Mike, he was one of the first promoters that started those camps,
Hmm.
those clips. He had those connections with Mike Bucci, with Tom Pritchard.
Yeah.
And before my time, I never was in on any of those,
Hmm.
but his reputation preceded that.
Yeah.
He was one of the first promoters that offered that. You'd go into one of those camps, you'd get looked at, and a lot of those guys went on to WWE TV, got extra work, got looked at in a serious way.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. A lot of us owe a lot of dues to Mike. He was.
It's because of me.
It's cause you me. I'll shit you to
Because
the
of
office.
me.
I'll shit you to the office, kid. How many times did you get fired and rehired in like a weekend?
Me?
Yeah.
I think once. Only once. I think once. Oh, God, hold on. There was that time where we were staying at the hotel. You remember the Rockland Hotel?
Yes.
And I was partying all night. And at some point during the party, I had put my wrestling gear on. So, we're like, we would get like 3-4 rooms that were attached to each other and sort of go in and out of each room. And we had girls with us, and there was a bar across the street. So we always had good times together.
Yes.
And I would go down. I went down to breakfast in my wrestling gear, up from the night before, still drinking. And I did not expect to see Mike Sparta waiting to get served breakfast at like 6:30 in the morning. And like the girl, remember, I traveled at that time with a camp of girls, we'll call them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were like kind of covering me because I was in my Speedos and my tassels. And I sat next to Mike while like eating my breakfast, like trying to sort of hide that I was in my wrestling gear, from the whole time. As he was like ranting and raving about, whatever bullshit. And then I think he eventually caught on. It was like, darling, listen, you're having too good a fucking time when you're coming here. When you come up, you're supposed to work. Go to the room and sleep. So I think he threatened to fire me. I don't think he ever did because I was always putting over his son.
Yeah, primetime Anthony.
That's right.
Yes.
And it was one of those things where it was like, he'd book me with his son who had, very little experience, wasn't very good. But I'd work with him. I'd have a match with him.
Mm-hmm.
And the crowd would pop.
Yep.
I was booked every show. Every show.
You took care of the kid on he was pissed at Josh because Josh cracked his rib one time, Josh Daniels, and he held Josh's car for ransom at his house. And there was one time he called me like, John Vega, I want you to work the kid. Then he calls me back. He's like, you know what? Never mind. But yeah. You did a good job with it.
I never quite understood that, Don, because like we were just saying, how Mike would help others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Give people opportunities.
Yeah.
Well, he did the same for his son. Guess what? Every wrestling promoter throughout history has done the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Vern had Greg, Fritz had all his sons. I mean, Vince has Shane.
Yeah, Stu had all his sons,
Give me a wrestling promoter that didn't put his son in the main spot.
Yeah.
They all did that move.
Yeah, they did.
So why would you, if you're a Josh Daniels, if you're a Samoa Joe, if you're any of those guys, why would you go in there and fuck this kid up?
Yeah.
Bro, okay, he blew a spot. He came in late. Like, you know what you're getting into. You got to make the best of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like in any, especially when you work with the promoter's kid. I mean, so for me, when I got in the ring with him and I had more than a handful of matches with him, it was what it was. I'm not saying it was, a WWE quality match, but the crowd popped when he frog splashed me.
Yeah.
That's all I had. That's all I needed to be. That's
Hey.
what I need to be.
Made the best of it. So we had some fun times with Spotter. We did a lot of things with him. We have to touch up before we continue on. We have to get into the X Pac incident with Spotter, and I think that was one of his last shows. I haven't heard from him since. What happened that weekend?
Wow, that was the last show. You're right.
Yeah.
So I'll tell that because I had a lot to do with that.
Mhm.
So Mike, I don't know what it was about like the promoter, what their recipe was for success. But at the time, it was like, oh, you get a big name to come in, and that's the big draw, and that's how you bring the people in, and this is how we work the whole show around.
Mhm.
That was sort of the philosophy back then.
Yeah.
So I had went to Florida. I wrestled in Florida. I met X-Pac. We exchanged numbers. And then when I spoke to Mike about, the next upcoming shows, I had mentioned to him, I got X-Pac's number. And he was super into it. So, the wheels start turning. X-Pac's booked. It's all a done deal. And it was sort of, there was no deposit. Everything was word of mouth because I had told X-Pac, this guy is good.
Mhm.
So X-Pac lands from his flight. I pick him up. I drive to Massachusetts. Funny story was, Mrs. Sparta comes to the hotel to deliver, I guess, a deposit to Sean, to X-Pac.
Mhm.
And she says something to X-Pac. I'm standing next to Sean, so I was witness to it. Like, oh, I should have put on my Depends because I'm so wet right now.
What the fuck? Oh man.
So right off the bat, me and Sean are like looking at each other like, what the fuck?
Mike sent it over to give the deposit and the extra bonus.
Yeah, we were right off the bat.
Give
It
a
was like,
deposit or
this
take
is
a deposit.
This is going to be a weekend, right?
Yeah.
And it was a hell of a weekend. We did have a great time.
Mhm.
The first show went off without incident. It was in one of like Mike's main buildings.
Yes.
The second show, however, I don't know what the situation was there, but I think Mike had like a cancellation in like one or two buildings and then got left to run in this building. This building, I mean, it was an abandoned building.
Yeah, I think that was
It
Taunton.
was the Mills,
Mills-
Anthony used to run it.
The Whittington Street, I believe.
Yeah, a warehouse. It was a
Yep.
warehouse building. Yeah.
It was an abandoned warehouse.
Yeah.
It didn't have windows. It didn't have windows. I don't think it had running water. It didn't have heat. Like, it was an abandoned building.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to the building, and like, this was back in the day before Facebook Live, before YouTube, you know what I mean? Before social media.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I remember I had like a flip camera that we used to record our matches on.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we did do a tour of the building, which is still on YouTube. You can still watch the video if you look it up for anybody that's listening that cares to.
Oh, I
But-
gotta see that shit.
We named it the Spartatorium. That was the Spartatorium. And I mean, listen, the turnout wasn't great. It was an abandoned building. And, X-Pac is X-Pac, man. He's very passionate about the business. So he's a person that is going to speak his mind when he's in a situation like that.
Yeah.
So I think he spoke his mind, and I think Sparta didn't appreciate it. And Sparta also didn't have all his money. So, it turned into a situation where the promoter didn't have the main event talent's money.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost got physical. I'm glad it didn't. Because I looking back on it, I would have hated to be telling the story of X-Pac fist fighting Mike Sparta. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he would have killed Mike.
You never know.
You never know. I might
Never
get my
know.
boys
Don't
after
count
him.
out the underdog. I'll fucking slice him, Vega. You know?
Oh man, yeah, that's
And
Mike.
and the conclusion of that story is that at the time X-Pac was living in Tampa, he was friends with Bubba the Love Sponge and also another radio personality, the Cowhead Show.
Hmm.
So, so X-Pac goes back home and goes on the fucking radio and, talks about the incident and makes it pretty well known that, like, Mike Sparta screwed him.
Yep.
It became like wrestling news for a minute,
Yeah.
And and Bob, oh wait, we forget Bob died that weekend.
That was the weekend. Bob had died, right? Or that same weekend of
I
that.
thought Bob was Mike's partner in the
Yeah, he
business.
was his money guy. Yep.
His money guy who always made sure there was cute boy referees. I don't, I'm not saying anything, but he always had his favorites when it came to the referees that were young boys.
Hmm.
And that's right, Bob died. Brother, the gate's light. Bob's dead.
I remember that.
You remember that? You remember that week he was going to go to Bob's funeral and talk to the family.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What?
To get the money, because Bob said he was gonna give Mike the insurance money to keep
Sorry,
running.
I'm sorry for your loss. Bob was my business partner and he owes me money. We got a show this weekend with X-Pac, and the show's got to go on. Bob would want it that way.
Oh man, that was great. That was great. I remember that conversation. Mike did call me and said, "Yep, fucking Bob."
That's right. Fucking Bob. He fucking died on me. He couldn't die next week.
It's so funny, but that definitely is something 100% that Mike would do and say, and everything's legit. I know people are watching. They're like, "Yeah, nah, we're not making this shit up." That's
Don
how.
Vega, tell me when I'm telling lies.
Nah, that's 100% what Mike was saying, what he said around that time. So going back to Sean being on that show and stuff like that, how the hell did Mike found out the information to call in? Because there's a video online somewhere. It has to be up around somewhere where Mike calls live on the air and they let him through and he gets into an argument. Sean, you got no liver.
I don't I don't know. I mean, it was, like I said, it was wrestling news for a minute, because X-Pac is X-Pac. I don't know how to say it, but like if he tweets something, Twitter was early at that point,
Yeah.
or if he talks to like wrestling journalists or news guys, like they picked it up, like he was X-Pac.
Yeah.
So like he had this weekend where he got shorted money. He didn't get paid in 48 hours like they had spoken about, and he made it public knowledge. And they picked it up, and somehow Sparta knew he was going to do this radio show and called in, and it was like a verbal thing,
That was
You
great.
got no liver, you got hepatitis. I let you in my ring, I did you the favor.
Mike was great, man. I wish I would get a private phone call from him. We're running again. Because for whatever reason, for years, Mike used to call me private, like at 6 in the morning. I'm like, Mike, I got your number. It doesn't matter. I'm like, all right.
The last time I spoke to Mike, I hope he's doing well. I've got nothing but love for him. If he called me tomorrow and said he was having a reunion show, bro, I'd be there 100%.
Yeah. Me too.
Last time he called me, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning. I got a private call.
Yep.
I don't know who it is, but for whatever reason, I answer the phone. He tells me, darling, he goes, I got to tell you something. He goes, I made a mistake with you. And I'm thinking, like, where's he gonna go? Where is he going with this? Like, what the fuck? I was like, I can't believe Mike Sparta's calling me years later at
Yeah.
4 o'clock in the morning. He goes, you would have made a hell of an Indian.
Oh man.
I'm like Tatanka? He goes, that's right. He goes, you would have made a hell of an Indian.
You know, if it gives you any consolation, brother, I brought Blackheart down and to see Uncle Mikey, and we had a match. I believe it was in Lynn, Massachusetts, and after the match, he goes over and says to Chris, he's like, "You know who you look like? You could be like Chief J Strombo. You wear the headdress, we'll call you Black Hawk."
So he was always looking for an Indian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was always had a hard on for the Indian gimmick, I guess.
It was like the time when I brought up TJ Marconi.
Yeah.
So TJ Marconi, he's wrestled quite a bit all over the New York, New Jersey area. Beyond, he's made his rounds quite a bit over the past couple of years. And when TJ was starting out, local guy, I knew him really well. I said, you got to come up and work for Mike Sparta.
Hmm.
So I told Mike about him. I said, you're gonna love him. I go, the dude's like 6'7". He's got a good size to him, bleach blonde hair.
Hmm.
Looks like a really white blonde Kevin Nash.
Yep.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Bring him up. We're gonna call him Nash Diesel. So TJ, if he's listening, he'll vouch for it. So I'm with TJ in the locker room, and I told TJ like about the Nash Diesel thing.
Hmm.
So Mike forgot the name, and I was like, "Oh, this is a blessing, right? Like we'll be able to
Yeah.
get Marconi on the show without doing the
Nice.
gimmick."
Yeah, the gimmick. Yep.
And then Spada comes up and goes, "Darling, come here, darling." She goes, "What was the name?" Oh, fuck. I'm thinking about it. I go, "Oh man, I can't remember." I go, Marconi. Marconi's his name. He goes, nah. He goes, Nasty. And then I looked at Marconi. I go, "Oh, sorry, bro. You're Nash Diesel."
Yeah, Mike was a great dude by coming up with these weird gimmicks. He wanted, originally he wanted to make me a judge. Uh,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, you've heard that story?
No.
Yeah, when I first met Mikey and we had conversations, I used to go to his shows. He actually used to hate me back in the day because I worked for his competition. Actually, our guest a couple weeks back, Joe Eugenio, he used to said, "Hey, you work for that cocksucker Eugenio." I'm like, "Yeah." Then finally, once I had my last run with Joe, we had a conversation on the phone. He's like, I'm gonna bring you in, but you kind of look like D'Lo Brown, and Judge Joe Brown is a big thing on television. Vince will love it. We're gonna call you
Yeah.
Downtown Vega Brown. That's the gimmick. I'm like, I don't think that's gonna. I'm telling you, it's gonna be good. I'm like, I don't know, Mike.
Yeah, that was another thing about Mike because he had all those connections that it was like, Vince is gonna love it.
Yeah,
Vince will love it.
he's like, you're not. I'm telling you, you're not gonna do shit with that Punisher stuff. I'm like, I should have listened to him. I should have been the judge. Who knows?
Well, it's never too late.
2024 is going to be great.
I should have been Downtown Vega Brown.
There you go, Poppy.
But Poppy, moving on from Mike, you did a lot of other things. You went back to New York. You had some runs out there in New York City, working for different companies out there. But you were always the party guy and controversial guy. And once we caught up again after the spotter run, you were dating an individual that a lot of people know. Uh, if we could get briefly into your dating scene for a moment. Uh,
Mhm.
you were dating Sonny. How did that come about?
You know, it wasn't a wrestling thing. You know, I didn't meet her at Tammy and I never worked a wrestling show together until after we were in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't meet her in a locker room. I didn't meet her like, you know, through wrestling. Um, like a lot of, you know, other relationships, I slid her DMs and we started chatting. We booked a date. We had a date on a Friday night. It was supposed to be a Friday night thing. It turned into a weekend long thing. And you know, it was what it was. You know, obviously towards the end of it went a little sour, and that got some publicity behind it, which, you know, sort of sucked for the both of us. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was a tough thing to deal with, you know,
Yeah.
obviously. But like anybody that asks me these days about my relationship with Tammy, it's like, yo, bro, like I look at him and I'm like, you want to talk about your ex-girlfriend from 10 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough spot, you know.
You know,
Certain.
no, and it's not even a tough spot. It's like, Don Vega, you know me.
Mm-hmm. It's
My father would say, one walks out the front door, two come in through the back window. You're talking about my park lifestyle and whatever. You got any Damien Darling stories, Don Vega?
Well, you know, I was gonna keep it, you know, family friendly, but fuck it, you know.
Don, I'll say this one thing and let me see if you pop for it.
Yeah, I remember that. Uh, we're working a show somewhere in Massachusetts, and I'm like, it was you and I working, and I left the ring. You disappear, and I'm coming into the locker room. I'm looking for you. You know, thank you for the match.
Rewind. We're working a show somewhere in Massachusetts.
Hmm.
I'm sitting next to that no good Eric Dillon. You know, if you're sitting next to Eric Dillon,
Was
you
this
might get in
Burt
trouble.
show?
Yeah, I
So
think it
I'm
was.
sitting next to Eric Dillon, and the show's delayed, right?
Yeah.
I'm sitting at my gimmick table, and you know, like we're meeting people. There's girls there, there's fans there, and there was a really cute bartender, really good looking girl. And I had this what do they call it now? I don't want to be canceled for saying the wrong thing. Like physically disabled.
Yep.
So the kid was like you know, like kind of really fucked up, right? So he's standing there, he's talking to me about wrestling. I'm giving him autographs, taking pictures with him, just doing what I can to give him the best experience possible at indie show.
Yep.
But, you know, the bartender's looking at me and I'm like now using this kid to like go over and get me Jack and Cokes.
Yep.
So listen, God bless this kid. He's like limping his crippled ass over to the bar, getting a Jack and Coke, bringing it back over to me. I mean, I had a couple of drinks before the show started, which was super unprofessional, and I apologize, Don Vega.
Hmm.
Now, this is how it started, right? So now I've got this kid getting me drinks. The bartender and I are flirting through this kid, whatever. I've got to go wrestle Don Vega in a tag match. The match is what it is, right? I think if I remember correctly, I potatoed Richie with one shot because I'm like seeing double. It was like sort of like the Rocky Four move where I was hitting the Don Vega that was in the middle.
Yep.
And Richie lit my ass up. I don't speak very much Spanish, but I was saying permiso, 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 which those who don't speak Spanish mean sorry, sorry, sorry. So we get through the match. I go into the locker room, and the bartender's waiting for me. And she was a cute girl.
Yeah.
So she like grabs me. And she's like, "Come here." She goes, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And, you know, and I'm like working the injury. I'm like, "Oh man, oh, I thought it was all fake." I go, "No, baby, this shit's fucking real." Fuck. So we're in the bathroom stall, and we are having a conversation in the bathroom stall together. Richie comes into Don Vega comes into the next bathroom stall, and he sees my tassels because I always wore like Harry Von Erich, Shane Douglas style boots. and I've got my hands on the railings for the bathroom stall, and I'm sort of like shaking a little bit, and I hear Don go, "Darling, you're right over there." I go, "Mhm."
Oh man, those are good times, man. Good
I
times.
just one weekend, one show, one town.
Ah,
The
it's di-
stories go on and on and on.
it's different times for certain nowadays. Uh, Chris, you're over here. You've been
No,
quiet.
I'm enjoying because I think that was the show for Bert Centeno
Yes.
out in like Fitchburg area
Yeah,
line.
Leominster, Fitchburg, something like that.
Yep.
And I always felt super bad about it because I have the utmost respect for Bert, and here he is, like the first time bringing me in, and here I am getting drunk before the show and catching a blowjob in the bathroom. You know,
It happens, Bert Bert loved that. He was happy with the show, so we got it over regardless. Uh, you know, no sins there. Chris Blackheart, any questions?
No, I'm enjoying the stories, and the ironic part about Spotter when it came, everybody thinks Spotter, Eugenio. You have all of these characters in New England as promoters, and as starting and running shows and been doing it now for over what 17, almost going on
Yeah,
18 years.
18 years, huh?
I know why talent drives people nuts, to say the least.
Hmm.
And now, supposedly Mike, like had different things he liked, right?
Yeah.
Some, and I'm like, I never want to be as crazy as Spotter, but I can understand how talent drives you.
Well, yeah.
They
I mean,
do, and I'm sure I must be like the modern day Sparta with some of the stuff I do because I know I have phrases and lines that I do
yeah,
that people like. Oh, here he goes.
yeah. You're killing me, kid.
Yeah, you killing me, kid.
Chris,
Yeah.
did I ever work for you, Chris?
I think it was once or twice. It wasn't a lot. Um,
Yeah, you never really brought me in much, did you, Chris?
no, we didn't.
He fucked ya.
Yeah,
You must not have appreciated my shtick.
yeah. Well, no, man, because I think because we started in '07, and I know at the beginning, Vega really, you were there a little bit, but not really.
Yeah, I was there for your beginning shows, and then after, you were running your thing, and I was working more for
Yeah.
Spotter and other places, and I would come in and out during that time. Uh, but yeah, nonetheless, after that, I want to talk a little bit about the LWA, the stuff that we were doing in Connecticut for Telemundo with
Loved it. That was one of my that was definitely one of my favorite things that I've ever done in my career.
So talk to us about a little bit about that. For the people that are watching and listening, we were doing the group there with Savio, and we had some fun times there too.
Well, rewind, right? Like backtrack to when we were doing the Puerto Rican Day Festival in
Hmm.
Rhode Island, and we would have a wrestling show in the middle of the Puerto Rican. You would know better than I. The
Yeah,
Puerto Rican.
Roger Williams Park, the Temple of Music. That one time we had just about 10,000 people that show that we worked there.
I know exactly. And by the way, those matches are on YouTube.
Yep.
No exaggeration. There's 10,000 people there.
Hmm.
And you and who's your partner at the time? Jose
Perez. Yep.
Perez. You guys come out, you're waving the Puerto Rican flag. Everybody obviously is in your corner. And then I come out, I forgot who my partner was.
Was it Vinton?
It was Scott Levesque.
Scott Levesque. So me and Scott come out. I'm in the sequin Confederate flag vest doing my final Freebird gimmick at that time.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you remember, but before we went out, you were like, Papi, you might not want to do that. Like, you might get a lot of heat. And I'm like, let's do this. And remember, I go out, I get on the mic, I cut a promo, and that crowd of 10,000 people were real.
I remember one of your lines. You're like, I've been done heard enough of that Selena bull crap.
Yeah, mira, 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 mira. Yeah, they were super hot. Like we had to wait a while before we could even leave the venue because people were hanging around. But like it was again, it was like one of those things where for me as a fan, as someone that got into wrestling, like that was my heroine. That was what I came here for. Like that kind of energy, that kind of atmosphere, that kind of crowd reaction.
Hmm.
Like you really had the fans in the palm of your hand. They really felt that anger towards you. And then you get in the ring with, with Don Vega and Jose, and they bump you around, bang, bang, bang. We have our tag match. It was awesome. It was an awesome experience. I don't know. I don't even know if they have that energy anymore now because now we live in such a different world. We can't. It's not socially acceptable to stir that pot, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so I don't know if you could do that anymore, but like we did it and it was a blast.
Yeah.
And I forgot what your original question was. Oh, your original question was the LWA.
Yep.
So we had that match. If you're listening to it, check it out on YouTube. Damien Darling, Don Vega, Jose Perez, Scott Levesque. It's out there. You'll see the crowd. It speaks for itself. And then the LWA. I mean, I don't know how that started, but my mother's from Argentina,
Hmm.
so I'm fortunate that I did have like some Spanish roots, some Latino heat. I was able to speak a bit of Spanish.
Yep.
And we had this opportunity to wrestle for this company that was Spanish based, that Savio Vega was involved in, that was on Telemundo. I mean, it was badass. I mean, there was always cute Latina girls there, so it was sweet.
Yep. That too. That was always, fun, and it was a fun experience having to work for a television product. Gives the experience. Like nowadays, we try to show guys how to do it, how to work for television, and to actually have the experience to go out there and do it is two different things than just saying it to somebody and hopefully they could understand it. So we got that opportunity to do that, and it was cool. I enjoy LWA. I wish it was still around.
I
Uh,
I agree because remember we would do those backstage segments,
yes,
and it was sort of like what do they call it? Sopatos,
yeah, it was
like
like it
a
was like,
bad Spanish soap opera.
hmm
So we would do those backstage segments, and I didn't know a lot of Spanish, but the few words that I knew, I would say, hey guys, like hey Savio, Don, I can do this. I could step in and say, hey, oyame chico, fuck,
yeah,
whatever, boom, step in. If I was stealing some shit from Scarface or Razor Ramon, whatever, it worked.
hmm
And it was great. It was a great time. It was a great experience. It was cool as shit to like watch on a Sunday you on Telemundo on the clicker.
hmm yeah,
Um,
definitely some cool vibes there, some good experiences. Uh, Damien, it's about that time. We're getting into the plugs. I know we were talking before that. We went on the air. You got some stuff that you want?
I want to take us back. What was fun too was that years later after LWA, I wrestled Apollo's son.
Yes.
I went down to Florida for like a one-off shot, like years, not years, but I wasn't wrestling as frequently as I was.
Hmm.
And I walk into the building, and Apollo's son walks over to me, and he goes, "Hey, do you remember me?" I go, "No," and and he's like, "I'm Apollo's son." I go, "Holy shit! The last time I seen you was 5 years ago. You were a kid
Yeah.
learning to jump off the top rope," and I
Hmm.
wound up working a tag team match with him.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I see him doing some stuff. He recently was on NWA Power, if I'm not mistaken. So he's doing his thing up in Florida. I think Apollo's doing some stuff up in Florida too, running a school. Shout out to those guys if they watch. I always enjoy working with those guys. And
They're always super cool guys. I always love that LWA group that we had. That, yeah, not to make it like a derogatory thing, but I just feel like the Latin American LWO Spanish community, whatever you want to call it.
yeah, we had a mix. We had
It, fraternity amongst the fraternity.
Yeah, we had a mix for everybody,
Yeah.
which made it good. Uh, but yeah, man, those were fun times. And to touch up real quickly before we go into those plugs, I know you've had a lot of runnings in your time going to Florida. You built a relationship not only with Sean, but you were close friends with Scott Hall and also Larry Sabisco. If you want to really quickly touch up on those guys and some of the stories and times you had with those guys.
It's a beautiful story because my career may not have went where I hoped it would have gone at some point in my life. However, I did make relationships that I look back on now, and you can't put a price tag on that. Those kind of experiences and those kind of lifelong stories will last forever.
Hmm.
Somebody like Scott Hall, who I watched the first time I ever watched wrestling as Razor Ramon, I went from a fan, to a friend to like family. Matter of fact, no kidding. My sister was here tonight, and my sister was telling her friend about how she knows how to lock up. And she knows how to lock up because Scott taught her here in my apartment.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's things like that. It's like, it was, I forgot how many years ago was it, but it was, I forgot how many years ago it was, but Scott was here after Thanksgiving before Christmas, pre-COVID. So we're talking 2019.
Hmm.
And it was just one of those things, it's tough to talk about Scott.
Hmm.
It's tough to talk about Scott because it was a sad ending. It was really meaningful friendship to me in my life. It's something I'll never forget. But I'm glad that I had the relationship with Scott that we knew where we stood with each other while we stood with each other. We always told each other what we felt about each other while we stood in front of each other.
Yep. Definitely,
If
it,
that makes any sense, there's a lot of emotion that comes out of me when I talk about
yeah, no,
Scott.
I can hear it, man. I know you were tight with Scott, and you guys had a good friendship, and he's definitely missed. He's one of those guys that can never be replaced because his memory will live on forever. He's one of those guys that made a mark uh, in wrestling and in general and entertainment. Uh, Another guy that we know as a living legend, Larry Sabisco. You also had a ties with him. How did that came about?
When I would travel to Florida to wrestle, um, there was a fraternity house that we would stay at, and Larry lived there. So it was it's a funny thing. Tom Brandy once said it to me, and he said only in wrestling could a 20-something-year-old go down to Florida, be staying in a frat house full of wrestlers, and there be a 65-year-old Larry Sabisco there. And that's what it was, that's how exactly how it was.
Mm,
And there's nothing else to tell to that story. And Larry's still living there to this day, living his best life, golfing and tanning and living.
yeah, yeah, definitely one of those guys that you barely hear mentioned, but Larry was definitely one of those guys that was the real deal, and his run with Bruno and
Hmm.
going back to those early days in the '80s and stuff like that. He's definitely a name that's you know uh, underestimated.
And I mentioned briefly my personal relations with Larry and Scott, but you know what? My favorite part about them professionally, wrestling wise, was that they never told you what you did good.
Hmm.
They always told you what you fucked up in.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like if you had a conversation with Larry after a show or Scott after a show, they didn't put you over. They said, hey bro, when you got punched and like your hand went to the next spot, why didn't you do this? Like when you get punched in the face, why do you do that? Like, and you're standing there like an idiot. And you're like, oh god, like yeah, you get punched in the face. Like put your hand, like oh, sell it, you know.
Yeah.
And Larry would be the same way. Like, hey, yeah, you know, darling, when you did that spot and you rolled through twice and you leapfrogged and hit the rope and ducked the clothesline and did all that. Why didn't you just drop toe hold him and take him down and hit a wrestling move?
Mm-hmm.
That's my Scott Larry Sabisco impersonation work. But yeah, they always tell you things that you need to improve on or work on or not do anymore. You know, hey bro, you hit that move. Don't do it anymore. It didn't look good. You know, so like, you know, float your boat. They taught you.
You know,
You-
you hit the nail on the coffin there by saying that, because nowadays a lot of guys want to hear the stuff that makes them feel good, and they get offended when you try to critique, and constructive criticism is the best, you know. But
Well, I think we live in a world now that does that, right? Like you're not supposed to say, "Hey, you didn't do that good.
hmm
Don't do it again." You know, like it was like, "Oh, you give it your best shot."
hmm
I mean, I remember one time, specifically when I was down there, I had a show in Florida, and I said to Chasen, and I said to him, I go, you know, I had a dream last night that I did an up and over out of the corner buckle, and I came up short. And he goes, don't do a up and over. Don't do it. Guess what? If you do a move, if you can't throw a drop kick, stop throwing drop kicks. If you throw a shitty punch, stop throwing punches.
hmm
Not every match needs a dive. Not every match needs a drop kick. Do something else. There's a million other moves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. A lot of
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you to do a Boston Crab. Nobody does the Boston Crab anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of moves that guys, because they either haven't learned it, or they just choose to do what everybody else is doing, even if it makes them look bad.
I think what happens is like, especially from my time now in like this wrestling school, is that you're dealing with a different generation. You're dealing with the video game generation.
hmm
Guys don't, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but from what I see in my area, at my school, whatever, it's a lot of guys. It looks like a video game. You know, move after move after move, big move, big move, big move.
hmm
And guys aren't realizing or learning that like there's other stuff to that. You know, there's character, there's personality, there's a physique, there's a look, there's wrestling gear, there's an entrance. You
hmm
can have a wide entrance, have a 1, 2, 3 match, basic simple stuff, and still be remembered by the crowd.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to do all this other shit. Whatever, I'm rambling.
No, man, definitely some valuable points for any youngins that are listening. You know that you try to embed this over and over again, and it goes one ear and out the other. Uh, you know,
We should timestamp this. So from 10 to like 10:05.
yeah, for the kids to listen.
Any of the kids who are listening,
Did it make sense what I was saying?
Of course.
those are your points right there. Well, you know, as far, going back to the story that you're saying about with Larry and Scott, as they weren't. It sounds like they weren't shitting on you. They were just telling you what wasn't good. And the problem I think with the young kids, they don't get that. If you tell them something wasn't good, they think you're shitting on them. You're just trying to make them better.
Yeah.
Everybody's sensitive these days.
Yeah.
You need
Yeah.
you need to have tough skin in this business. You
Yeah.
need to have tough skin in this world.
hmm
And that's the truth. Um, no, and if you're going to be an independent wrestler, if you're going to be a professional wrestler, you need to know what you can do, what you can't do, and not everybody can do everything.
hmm
But you have to do what you can do well.
Yes. Definitely a valuable point there. And with that being said, Damien, I know we talked before we went on the air. You have some plugs that you want to get out there to the people. Uh, if you wanna do those now.
I just got 2 quick plugs. If anybody is listening that's a wrestling figure collector, I have a very good friend of mine, Mabel Toys. He is on Instagram. He's on Twitter. He's on eBay. He is the number one Hasbro distributor in the world. If you're looking for a Hasbro figure, whether it's custom, whether it's one of those old school figures, Mabel Toys, that's Mabeletoys, Mabel Toys, for all your Hasbro wrestling collection needs.
You pull it out there on the screen, Danny? Yep. So it's up on the screen. You go and check out Mabel Toys. What was the other plug you had, Damien?
Second one is one that's near and dear to my heart. That's the Five Time Foundation. That's a nonprofit organization that I am working with. That's founded by a 6-time cancer survivor. That goes directly to children that are fighting cancer. That's 5X Foundation .org. That's ran by a friend of mine, Rich Cansey. He does a tremendous amount of work, again, non-for-profit. So everything that gets donated, anything that gets sent to them, whether it's toys or anything of that sort of thing, it goes directly to the children of need. It gets put on Instagram so you see where your donations go to. That's 5timefoundation.org.
Yeah, I think we got that. We got that also. We'll pull that up on the screen there.
Damien Darling in for the hose no more. I'm for the children.
For the children, that's what's up, man. You gotta be good, Damien, nowadays.
I'm trying to make my way to heaven.
Ah, man, come on now. So Damien, man, it's been a blast. We gotta do this. We gotta do this in person, though, man. It's been too long. We gotta hook up again. We gotta put you on a show. You gotta dust off the boots.
Blackheart, when's your next show?
Our next show is
We got plugs right now for you.
January 6th. We're back at the Showcase Pro Wrestling Training Center and Arena. That's Saturday, 7:07 p.m. bell time.
I won't be in shape by January 6th, but maybe February.
Yeah,
Well,
maybe
what about the
February.
following week? Either the 12th in Taunton or the 13th in Franklin.
Yeah, all those days that are coming up.
Will that extra week help you think? Or?
Definitely getting into those plugs. But
Yeah.
all jokes aside, before we get into those, Damien, it's been a blast. We definitely got to hook up. We'll definitely have you come down, whether it is to wrestle or to hang out. You're always welcome, and I love you for real. You're one of my guys.
I got you.
We've always had a good relationship, and we got to catch up, man.
Don Vega, it was a pleasure. Chris Blackheart, it was so good talking to you. Thanks for saying all of about a dozen words this whole podcast.
I'm glad I could be able to help. Hey, I learned more about you, which is fantastic because it's funny how you've known people, but you don't know them. So your
Right.
story, hopefully, the words of wisdom to the young kids. So it's,
I learned so much about you tonight, Chris Blackheart. Man, a few words.
Oh, don't worry. Okay, we'll flip the switch. You'll be over here, then you can interview me. How's that?
I love it. Dare you.
Yeah.
All right, Damien.
Later, guys. Have a good night.
Later,
Thank
man.
you.
Have a good night. Happy holidays, brother. So there you go. The final Freebird, Damien Darlin on the Showcase Pod. Controversial, to say the least.
What-
This was the
But
this was the PG version.
I think the good part about it, he dropped a lot of nuggets and knowledge that if you wanted to find out more, you could.
Yes.
And I think that's the important part. And ironically, some days, and even though it's a podcast, it's not always about talking. Some days it's about listening. And he has a great story that goes up and down and turns around.
Yeah.
And the fact that, even at the end, he's dropping knowledge to the young kids.
Mhm.
And hopefully they're smart enough to pick it up and run with it. With that being said, our plugs, January 6th. We're getting ready for Christmas time, and nobody wants a sweater. Nobody wants a pair of sneakers of Nikes that are retreads of Air Jordans or Air Nothings.
Oh, you see. You just
Oh yeah. Oh, I did it.
gave a plug. You gave a free plug.
I did. Hopefully, Brandon. If you have friends out there that want the ultimate Christmas gift, we are running a fantasy camp on January 6th for $49. If you have it on your bucket list, if you ever thought about doing it, is basically is 13 to 90, right? Obviously, 13, a parent or guardian has to be there, sign off on a waiver, but it is the ultimate Christmas gift for any fan right there.
Hmm. So you get to experience how it is behind the scenes, build your own entrance, wear that gear that you wear in your room, hiding away from your parents.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're 40 years old, you're wrestling in your basement. Who knows? You could bring it to the Showcase Pro
No,
Wrestling
but
Training Center
we'll get the
January
crash
6th.
pads though. If you
Yes.
maybe you do body slams, so we'll get the dummies out. You know, if you want to do elbows, leg drops. You know, everybody says they want to wrestle. This is the ultimate test if you actually want to do it.
Yep. So there you have it from 3 to 6, January 6th. And then at 7:07 p.m. we'll have a show. That's a Saturday night. And then following week we're back in Taunton, Massachusetts as the road to March of Versus 17 begins. This is the 12th, Friday night, 7:47 p.m. bell time. Chris Blackheart, a lot of things are happening, and it's gonna be a standoff.
Which we're going to get into next week, because next week is not only going to be the weekend review, it's going to be, well, you look like you have something on your mind. Like you have,
I don't have anything
I mean,
on my mind. I'm just looking forward to the new year, the
a
upcoming
new year.
events.
I think you're looking to regain something, but
And speaking of upcoming events, the following night we're back at the Franklin Elks Lodge in Franklin, Massachusetts, Saturday night, 7:07 p.m. bell time. The main event has been signed for that card as New England's favorite superstar Ted Goods takes on MLW superstar Ichiban. Tickets are on sale now. ShowcaseProWrestling.com. You want to get there. You want to get your tickets. You know, last time we've been there, it's been sold out, so
Yep.
you want to get your tickets ahead of time for that. Moving on to February, we're back at the training center and arena on February 4th, Friday night, 7:47 p.m. bell time. And on February 16th, back in Taunton, Mass, another Friday night, 7:47 p.m. And like I said, we're on the road to March versus 17. 17 years, Chris
I
Blackheart.
know. Plus, why when we started, I didn't have a timeline of how long it'd be going. Usually go show after show, but if you told me back in '07 that would be going for 17 years, myself or Kathy never would have thought of it.
Does she know you got 17 more to go? Or?
Oh, don't tell her that.
Oh, don't tell
Don't
her that.
tell
Okay,
that.
we'll save that. How about we save that for next week when we're back here on the
Yes,
Showcase Pod.
yes.
But for now, that's all we have this week. We thank you for joining us. It's been great. We hope you have a Merry Christmas, a safe one, a blessed one. Take care of your family. Love them, like them. Chris Blackheart's the Grinch. He doesn't know about that. But we'll be back here next week live on the Showcase Pod. This is Don Vega. That's the boss, Chris Blackheart. We'll catch you down the road.